Some people absolutely love roller coasters. They immediately get in line to ride again and again, and others avoid them. One group excitedly talks about the fun, the thrill, but for the other group, there's nothing worse than being dragged onto a roller coaster by a persistent friend. The oldest roller coaster out there is one we can find ourselves riding whether we want to or not. It's the roller coaster of emotions. The ride just takes over, and we're carried away by our emotions. Emotions are not bad, but they can be detrimental if we let them take over and rule our lives. The writers of the Psalms were not hesitant in expressing their emotions, and in the study, When Emotions Rise, we'll see how they express those emotions toward God. Through their Psalms, we'll discover how to convey our own emotions in a healthy, Christ-honoring way.
Hey y'all, happy Sunday. It is the Sunday after Christmas, so I hope you all had a very Merry Christmas and you got some stuff that you wanted and you got to maybe spend some time with your family and that you remembered the reason for the season, Jesus' birthday. So, this morning we're going to be talking about redirecting our anger. It's going to be same series Miss Stephanie was talking about last week. We are going to be in Psalm 35, 1 through 3, and 13 through 18. And we are going to be talking about how to give your anger to God and leaving it with Him.
So the question for today is, what's your biggest pet peeve? And my biggest pet peeve is when people stand in the middle of a hallway or a sidewalk in school and you can't get around them and they won't move, so you have to like squish your shoulders in and like kind of awkwardly.
You have your backpack on?
Yeah. And it's not fun for anybody. And I really dislike those people. So what is your biggest pet peeve?
I don't know what my biggest pet peeve is. Probably people, a lot of stuff happening while I'm driving and like people cutting you off or a lot of stuff.
Huh. Okay, so we got road rage, we got hallways. So, Psalm 35, 1 through 3, and Kennedy
I'll
is
read
going
it for
to
y'all.
read that.
Okay. So, oppose my opponents, Lord. Fight those who fight me. Take your shields, large and small, and come to my aid. Draw the spear and javelin against my pursuers and assure me I am your deliverance.
Okay, so this is talking about David. We're in Psalms, and this is when David is running away from Saul because Saul's trying to kill him to keep the crown with Saul and keep his kingdom under his control. And David was rightfully angry, and he was, he's trying to, the normal thing to do would be to take that anger out on Saul. It's probably what most of us would do if we're being honest. But David had, a lot of trust in God and his plan. And it says here that David had multiple opportunities to kill his enemy, Saul. And it brings up the story where David and his men were hiding in a cave. And Saul went into that very cave to go to the bathroom. And David could have easily killed Saul, but he didn't. And, he took the little square off his robe. And when Saul walked out, he held it up and shouted to him that he could have killed him, but he didn't. Which, it shows a lot of faith in God because, I probably would have not done that, just to put that simply. I think if a lot of us were being honest, we would. There were multiple things where David really showed his trust in God. David didn't seek vengeance. Instead, he sought God. In this psalm, we see a cry for David's opponents to be disgraced, humiliated, and ashamed and ruined. And David expressed his anger and a frustration to God, but he left the matter there and he left it in God's hands. So, this is the second question. What might keep us from being honest with God about our anger? And I think it's that our human reaction is that we don't like to admit that we're wrong, even though we may be.
Yeah.
And we try to place the blame on other people and other things instead of, realizing that the core problem is with ourselves.
And another thing is, when we give our anger to God, we are most likely, everybody's probably hoping that God is going to give a little bit of bad karma to that person or those people, give them a little vengeance to appease our fleshly desires. And that's not always the case. Sometimes God is going to say that we need to forgive them and we just need to let it go and put it in the past. And we don't want Him to do that. We want something to happen to them because they did something bad to us. But we just have to remember that's not always the plan. Maybe there's something else going on. And again, that's when we have to have that trust in the Lord and the faith in him to just carry things out as they are meant to be carried out.
Right. And the second set is 13 through 15, and then later on we'll go into 16 through 18. But
Okay.
would you please read that for
I
us?
guess. Yet when they were sick, my clothing was sackcloth. I humbled myself with fasting, and my prayer was genuine. I went about mourning as if for my friend or brother. I was bowed down with grief, like one mourning for a mother. But when I stumbled, they gathered in glee. They gathered against me. Assailants I did not know tore at me and did not stop. With godless mockery, they gnashed their teeth at me.
And basically what that's saying is that's another point of how David was really giving his anger to God and letting God take control of that situation. So it says that when they were sick, they is referring to his enemies, and it says, when my enemies were sick, my clothing was sackcloth, and I humbled myself with fasting, and my prayer was genuine. That shows that David really feels like kind of compassion towards his enemies instead of, remorse and like hate, because he's humbling himself and he's fasting, which was like, you really feel bad, and you're really trying to focus on God by taking all the unnecessary extra stuff out of your life. And it says here that I went about mourning as if for my friend or brother, and I was bowed down with grief, like one mourning for a mother. And that's again showing how much compassion and really just sadness that he had with his enemies stumbled and fell and made a mistake. But then it goes on to say, but when I stumbled, they gathered in glee and they gathered against me. So David is showing all this kindness toward his enemies, but when he messes up and he falls and he trips, they're all pointing the finger and laughing because, they're just his enemies, and that's how, like, a normal reaction. And the assailants I did not know tore at me and did not stop. With godless mockery, they gnashed their teeth at me. And that's just showing, like, the cruelty that these people had towards David.
And so our normal reaction to that would be, if you see all these people doing this to you and they're just making fun of you and they're talking about you behind your back, and you know that they've gone and told some other people about all this stuff you did, so there's who knows how many numbers of people talking about you and saying all these bad things about you, like, our fleshly reaction, our fleshly desires would be to maybe go back and do the same thing, or seek revenge on them and then go and tell everybody or maybe go and spread a lie about them so they'll stop talking about you. But we see in the next two verses, 17 through 18, how David reacts and what he does with the anger and the frustration inside of him. So I'm just going to go ahead and read that for us.
Well, hold on. Before we do that, we got questions. Don't get ahead of yourself over here, Kenny. So the question over here is, how do you typically respond when you are mistreated? And I would say it's a lot like David's enemies. You have anger, you have hate, you really dislike the person that mistreats you. You don't have any sympathy for them. It's kind of pretty sure we've all been in a situation where we can relate to that. And how can we respond well when we are treated this way? I say keeping a level head is probably the best way. Of course, giving it over to God, being calm, be the bigger person. The phrase, try to take the moral high ground, where kill them with kindness, that kind of way. That's just my idea.
Yeah, and I would say sometimes we would think that in those types of situations, like being calm and level-headed is good, but so we feel this anger, we feel this frustration, but also just keeping it inside of us and like bottling it up and not doing anything about it, like just keeping it inside and letting it build up through all these different situations happening over a long period of time, that's ultimately not going to turn out well, and it's all going to boil over, and it's just going to turn into a big mess. So that's when we need to turn our anger over to God immediately. We don't need to let it sit inside of us and then we'll start holding grudges, and that's just as bad as letting that anger fume out when it's starting to happen. So I'll go ahead and read if it is time.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead and read 17 and 18, and we can see how David responds to all the hatred that he is being flung at him and all the anger and frustration he's feeling from that. Lord, how long will you look on? Rescue me from their ravages. Rescue my precious life from the young lions. I will praise you in the great assembly, and I will exalt you among many people.
And that's just really David's like cry for help. He's just he's suffering so much. His friends and his friends and people he's known for a long time, and then just turn their back on him and they want to kill him all of a sudden. Saul, David was, he was good friends with Saul. He was good friends with his son Jonathan, and that was the father. And I think it was very shocking when David figured out that Saul really, really wanted to kill him. And that's got to be a really hard situation to go through. And he's really, at this point, he's just given up, and he wants to give it over to God, and he wants God to rescue him, but that wasn't God's plan. And, he eventually did rescue him, but it wasn't.
It wasn't immediately.
Yeah, it wasn't when David wanted him to.
Mm-hmm.
And just some questions here. Why is it difficult to leave matters in God's hands? I would say that for me personally, it's hard to just sit by and let nothing happen, because that's typically when nothing gets done, is when you don't do anything. But in this case, it's probably better to leave it in God's hands, because we probably just would make it worse at the end of the day. So, do you want to say anything, or just move on?
Why is it difficult to leave matters in God's hands? I would say definitely what Brett said, because, again, our fleshly desires, like, we want immediate karma or immediate vengeance, and we want to see them suffer for the wrongdoings they do against us. And so when you give that to God, there's different things that can happen. He can show that revenge on that person, for lack of a better word, or he can say that you need to forgive them and just let it go, and that's not what many of us want to happen. Or it can just go on for a really long time before anything happens, and you just don't know, and you're just sitting around, like Brett said, and you still probably have a little bit of frustration with God at that point, when nothing is happening and you think that you suffered for absolutely no reason at all. But you just have to remember to trust God and His plan, and that He doesn't let things happen to you for no reason, and there's always a reason for something to happen in your life, even if you can't tell or you don't know why.
Right. And how is God glorified when we leave matters in His hands? It really shows that we have just that much trust in Him, and that we really just have that much faith in His plan that it'll work out in the end, even though it might not be instant. I would say that's a big reason that He's glorified in that, is that you have so much faith and so much trust that you just will lay down everything and just let Him take care of it.
And another thing I would say, how God is glorified when we leave the matters in His hand, when you do get angry and people are around you in situations, they see the wrongdoings that are happening to you, and they see how you keep a calm, a level head, and how you're not letting all this anger just explode out of you, and you're not like talking back to this person or going back behind their back and spreading lies. I think when people know that you're a Christian and they see you doing those things, God is also glorified in that. They see, oh, wow, like they're super calm in the situation. I would have totally like busted out and like knocked them up on the ground. But when they know you're a Christian and they see you doing these things, and they see you just being nice to them and keeping a calm, level head and not letting things get to you, they're like, oh, maybe I should try that, or maybe I should go and ask them, like, how did they do that? Because there's no way I would have been able to do that. And then that's ultimately another way to like share God, and
it's a good influence.
Yeah,
it's a good way.
Mm-hmm. That's he can be glorified in that way as well.
But you're being a light. Describe the reasons you become angry. Are these selfish or righteous? And a lot of people try to justify anger because they say that, well, there's situations in the Bible where God gets angry. But God is not, He's not angry because something was happened to Himself. He's angry because something unjust happened, and He wants to make that right, because He is righteous. We oftentimes, we may be righteously angry, but I'd say more than likely we are selfish in our anger because we got wronged, and that we want to make it right for ourselves, and we have our own reasons.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Okay. And so I know, like, most of these the examples that we've been talking about are when like somebody or some person or a group of people do something to like a wrongdoing to you and how to react in that. But this whole lesson is just on anger. And that's not the only way to get angry. You can get angry about little things going wrong in your life, like, I don't know, maybe
not finding a TV remote.
Yeah, not finding a TV remote, or you get stuck in traffic and then you're late to wherever you're trying to go. Like all those little things. And that is anger that, like, why do we get angry about that? It's because sometimes we may think like, oh, I have the right to not be stuck in traffic. I have the right to get to where I'm going on time. But like we don't. We don't have the right to not get a flat tire while we're driving, or we don't have the right to always know where the TV remote is. Like, where does all those little, like, petty little angry things, like with your siblings or even your parents, those come from, like, nowhere. Like, we just kind of make up the anger inside of us just because something didn't go the way we wanted it to. And that's an example of selfish anger that we don't need to have. And even those little things, those little tiny little bits of anger throughout the day, those are sin. Like, we know that having all this anger towards a person or a big group of people for doing something wrong to you is sin. But even those little tiny bits of sin that we have throughout the day, when our parents tell us to go clean our room and we're just like, oh my gosh. And we still go do it, but that's still not obeying, because then we still had that anger and we were still angry and we didn't give it to God. So you just have to remember, not just the big blowouts of anger that you can have, but even just the small little bits of frustration that you have throughout the day. That's also anger, and that's also anger that you have to give to God, even if it seems pointless, like it's whatever, like it doesn't matter. It does.
Yeah, the inconveniences
overall,
and all this other stuff.
Overall, again, like what I was talking about, all those little tiny bits of anger can build. If you just keep them inside yourself and they build up, then those can turn into a big blowout, and then that's even worse. So even not just the big blowouts of anger that you feel when someone does a wrong to you or misguides you, even those little bits of anger throughout the day from an inconvenience or something small going wrong, we have to remember to give those to God as well.
It's like a snowball going down a hill. It just gets worse and worse, bigger and bigger, and then eventually something bad happens, and we don't want that. Everyone gets angry. It's just the difference is how you react when you get angry. There are a lot of people just let it all out, and they go absolutely ballistic. A lot of people just, they just take a breath, step back, let God take care of it, and they're all right. That's about all I got, and that's probably about, is that all you got too?
Yeah, so we'll just all the way back to the point of this lesson. The whole point of this lesson is taking your anger to God and leaving it in His hands. Even when you don't want to, or even when you think it's so small and it's so petty that it doesn't need to be given to God, that you can just deal with it, it'll fume off later. You just have to remember that all those little inconveniences or those big angry blowouts that you have, giving those to God, that will give you like more peace and calm, and not just, that'll make your life easier, I would say personally, when you're not stressed or frustrated over all these things. Giving it to God and just giving it in His hands. And that's what we're supposed to do with sin in general. That's what anger is. Everyone always says, give your sin to God. Give it to Him, because you can't overcome it by yourself. That's the same thing. You cannot overcome your anger by yourself. You have to give it to God, and you have to let Him take control of it in your life. So I'll just go ahead and pray us out.
Yeah, that's
okay.
fine.
Bow your heads. Hey, God, I just want to thank You for today, Lord. I want to thank You for this lesson, God, that we were able to read and focus on. I just want to pray over these verses, Lord, as everyone is reading them during this lesson, God. I pray that we are able to meditate and focus on them, Lord, and just to remember all the angry emotions that we feel, God. It's not just an emotion, God. It is a sin, and that it is a sin that we need to give to You like all other sins, Lord. I just want to pray over each person on the other side of the screen watching this, Lord. I ask that You help us to take all the little angries, the big angries, and we just give them to You, God, and we remember to have our faith and our trust in You, God, that it will be delivered out, God, and that when we are angry or we're suffering, God, that You will deliver us out of each of those things, Lord. In Your name I pray. Amen. Peace out. Hey, y'all. Good morning. Oh.
All right, cut that out. Edit that part out.
I can just do it. Do that. That'd be a lot easier. You ready?
Wait, yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday. It is the Sunday after Christmas. I hope you all had a very Merry Christmas and got...
It's Tuesday. Oh!
word, Fred. We'll just have a blooper reel at the end. Oh my gosh. He goes, it's Tuesday.
I was like, what are you smoking? This is Tuesday. This ain't Sunday. It hadn't even been Christmas yet.
Oh my.